I set the table the way my mother taught me, as if care itself could call a person home. 2 plates went back into the cupboard. 1 stayed, the good china with the tiny ivy leaves that climb the rim like they're looking for sunlight, a folded napkin, a cup with a soft chip only I can find with my thumb. I cut a slice of honey cake I'd baked the night before, and the knife made that small, polite sound porcelain makes, a clink that feels like manners. I told myself I wasn't waiting. I told myself I was simply ready. Mother's Day always makes the house louder with quiet. Walls breathe differently. The clock in the hallway clicks with a stubborn heart. I dusted the mantel twice, though it didn't need it, and straightened the photograph of my boy in his little league uniform with grass stains on his knees and a grin as wide as a summer window. He was all eyes then. Serious about everything. He used to hand me macaroni cards and whisper, "Don't look, Mama," while I pretended not to see the glue on his fingers. Funny how a small boy can fill a house with a future. Funny how a grown man can empty it with a single decision. I brewed tea and let it go cold, then brewed more. I put on my blue Sunday dress because I liked the way the fabric sits on my shoulders. I put on lipstick, the kind I always say I'm too old for and then wear anyway. I opened the curtains so the room could have the sky. I told myself maybe church ran long. Maybe the girls had a recital. Maybe there was traffic or a missed turn or a nap that went too long. Hope is a soft liar when you've been a mother long enough. By late morning, the street started blooming with other people's children. A pair of boys carried a bouquet like a trophy. A woman in a bright dress walked her mother up a pathway, the older woman's hand tucked into her elbow like a secret. Laughter floated over hedges in little pockets. My house held its breath and counted to 10, then did it again. It felt like standing at a bus stop for a route that doesn't run on Sundays. I moved the cake to the kitchen, sat a while, stood a while. My ones have the map of this house memorized. They take me to windows when I'm trying not to look, and to the kettle when I'm trying not to think. I ran a dishcloth over the counter just to see the streaks disappear. It's nice how small messes obey. I thought of my husband sanding the banister, the dust rising like warm snow. The way he'd lean back and admire nothing at all, like it was everything. The house remembers those looks. Wood learns a person. When the knock came, it shook me like a small thunder. 3 short raps, brisk, working man polite. I smoothed my dress, smoothed my face, smoothed the tremor in my chest as if it could be pressed flat. On the porch stood a young man in a brown jacket, a courier bag slung across his body. Cheeks wint. He held a big insulated sack like a promise and a white envelope like a thin slice of moon. "Delivery for Carter," he said, reading off a label. "That's me," I said, which is true for a lot of Carters on this street, but truest in this doorway, in this blue dress, with this stubborn hope. "Sorry it's late," he added, though it wasn't, food in a packet. He passed me heat first, steam-wrathed, with rosemary and butter, then paper that seemed to weigh more than it should. His smile was a good one, worn, young, decent. I think of the boys I taught to tie their shoes. I think of the boys I scolded for climbing the fence. I think of my son at that age, jaw already learning to set like a gate. "Enjoy, ma'am," he said, and trotted back down the steps to his car, which cried a little when he started it. Inside, the kitchen greeted me like always, with its clean counter and the small window where the light gets trapped around 4 o'clock and turns the room honey. I set the warm bag down, ate one breath, ate another, then let the lid give beneath my fingers. The smell came like music. Chicken, stuffed with something green and mashed potatoes that still carried their steam, asparagus, slick and proud. The kind of meal you send when you want to say what your mouth won't. The containers were labeled for 3. I pretended it was a mistake that made sense. People make generous mistakes all the time. They drop the extra napkin into your takeout bag. They wave you through the 4-way stop. Surely this was the kind of mistake that still lands a person in kindness. I think of little girls with grass-smelling hands pressing fistfuls of clover into my pockets. I think of tiny fingers counting my rings like beads. I think of the first Mother's Day after I buried their grandfather and how my boy brought fried chicken in a greasy bucket and said, "We'll eat on the floor like a picnic," and we did. Knees creaking, hands shining. The grease stain stayed in the rug like a small oily moon that never learned how to set. That stain never bothered me. It meant joy had been messy here once. I am a woman made of stains I chose to keep. I opened the envelope because curiosity has always outrun my fear. It had weight, the way a decision has weight. The paper was quality stock, creamy and a little toothy under the fingertips. A smug sort of nice. There was a logo stamped at the top. a grove of trees rendered in gold so thin it nearly disappeared if you tilted it. It read like a greeting from money. Welcome to morning maple retreat. I read the first line twice. Then again, because words sometimes change when you're not looking. I waited for one to crack open and make a joke of itself. They did not. Welcome, resident, it said. My name followed. Full and correct. The sound of it made my heart fold a little, like it was being filed away. Beneath was a date I did not recognize, and a list of things that belonged to me without asking. The blood pressure numbers I monitor because I want to watch my grandchildren grow. The medications I line up like little brave soldiers. The allergy to sulfa drugs that almost stole me at 35 and never will again as long as I can remember. It knew things my own son forgets when he calls without listening. There was a payment method on the page. My bank. My account. The numbers so familiar, I felt myself counting them in my head before I was done seeing them on the paper. It is a strange thing to watch your life fit on a page. It is stranger still to see your life moved to a place you do not remember choosing. I sat. The chair took me in with a small wooden sigh. The refrigerator hummed like a warning buried in a song. Outside, someone's wind chimes traded gossip with the breeze. In the reflection on the oven door, I saw a woman holding a paper that called her by her name and asked her to give it away. The note was stuck to the top corner, the way you stick a reminder to the edge of a mirror so you won't forget your face. A square of yellow, the handwriting neat and hurried, like the writer had time but not patience. It said, *** packet for Doug to sign. Once it's official, she'll be moved by early summer. Finally, ***, finally, as if my life were a long overdue library book, and the fee had become embarrassing. I turned the page. Because I am a woman who always turns the page. Inside, floor plans and amenity lists that read like apologies wrapped in lavender, a walking path that circled a small ornamental pond, an activities calendar with watercolor butterflies. Tuesdays were for chair yoga, Thursdays for sing. Every room had a view. Every hallway had a rail. Every door could be opened by someone in a uniform who has never seen me laugh in my kitchen until I cry. They had a salon for pampering. They had memory care in the same print size as game night. They had an entire section about safety, like I was a burning candle in a room full of curtains. The label on the takeout bag winked up at me. 3 entrees. Names written with the same pen. My son, his wife, her mother. The food had been meant to celebrate their plans, perhaps, or to make decisions taste better going down. They had ordered abundance for themselves and sent me the leftovers of their kindness by accident. It would be a funny story if it weren't a knife. I pressed my palm flat against the countertop because I needed something that wouldn't move. The kitchen tile was cool, and the grout slightly rough. And those are the kinds of facts I cling to when the other facts begin to tip. My heart did that old hurt a body gets used to and never forgives. I pictured my husband at the table with the morning paper, one foot tucked beneath his chair, saying, "Millie, slow down," in that gentle way that meant keep going. He signed this. I said aloud to no one. And my voice sounded like it had swallowed gravel. Or he will. I am not a woman who has ever needed to shout to be heard. I learned long ago the way a quiet voice can undo a room. The phone sat on the counter as innocent as a sleeping cat. The numbers remembered me. They always do. Before I touched it, I stood very still and listened to the house tell me what it knows. The faucet dripped at its usual stubborn interval. A car eased by, and its radio spilled a chorus I couldn't place. The kettle, empty, wore the light like jewelry. On the porch, the doormat waited with its little braided patience. The house did not bow to this paper. The walls did not lean. My name lived on them like a blessing carved with time. I folded the packet once, then again, and each crease sounded like a door closing softly. I did not cry, and this was not pride. I've learned tears have their place and their hour, and this was neither. This was the hour of inventory. The hour of putting one thing beside another and seeing what they make when they touch. A son's name. A bank number, a signature line, a mother's spine. I thought of all the versions of me that stood in this kitchen across years, like beads on a string. The young wife who burned the first roast and cried into the sink. The new mother swaying at 3 a.m., with a feverish boy on her shoulder, humming nonsense to trick him into sleep. The widow who learned the sound of the house without a second heartbeat in it. The old woman me now, who knows where the light will land at noon better than she knows what her son will say when he calls. Slid the packet under the bread box because I needed it close enough to watch and far enough not to poison the counter with more of its gold-lettered courtesy. Then I opened the container of asparagus and ate one spear with my fingers, like a thief. It snapped, sweet and green. I chewed until the taste turned honest. Sometimes you have to put something living on your tongue when paper tries to make you a rumor. I don't know how long I stood there after reading that note. Time does strange things when it hurts. Sits, stretches, and folds until minutes feel like hours, and hours collapse into one long heartbeat. I stared at that gold logo until the letters blurred, and I thought, so this is how a life gets stolen quietly, with paperwork. The air felt heavier. I sat down. The chair creaked like it understood. I kept thinking of the word finally. It echoed around the kitchen like a mosquito you can't catch. Finally, as if they'd been waiting for me to fade. As if patience were the only thing standing between them and my disappearance. I dialed my son's number. My hands didn't shake until after the third ring. On the fourth, he picked up. "Hey Ma," he said, cheerful and thin. The kind of voice people use when they're halfway somewhere else. "Busy day?" I asked. "Yeah, real busy. You okay?" I could have said yes. I could have tucked it all away. Let him believe the lie he'd built. But something in me snapped clean. "I got a delivery today," I said. "A meal. And a letter from Morning Maple Retreat." Silence. The kind that fills your throat with dust. Then I heard the shuffle of his hand over the receiver. The faint mutter of a woman's voice, Rachel's, and a muffled words. "She found out." When he came back, his tone had changed. "Ma, listen." "No," I said. "You listen. You were going to send me away like an unwanted dog. You used my money, my name, my trust." "It's not like that," he said, voice cracking like a boy caught in a lie. "We just thought Rachel thought it would be good for you. Safe. You'd have people around. Medical help." I almost laughed. "You mean control. You mean quiet. You mean out of sight so you don't have to look at what time does to the woman who raised you." He sighed through his nose, impatient now. "You're being dramatic, Ma." That word. Dramatic. It's what men say when they want to make women small. I'd spent 50 years learning not to flinch when men shrink you to fit their guilt. "I'm seeing it clearly," I told him. "And clearly, you've forgotten who you came from." He started saying my name, soft at first, then louder, "Ma, Mama," like maybe he could rewind time if he said it enough. I hung up. The click was sharp. Final, like a key turning in a lock I'd forgotten I owned. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything I hadn't said. I looked around my kitchen, the blue curtains, the faded calendar with flowers that never wilt, the cake cooling on the counter like an apology no one would eat. Every piece of it was mine, paid for in years, and laughter and burnt roasts and bedtime stories. And my son had signed it away with a pen. That night, I didn't cry. I cleaned. I scrubbed the counters until they gleamed, not because they needed it, but because I did. Control starts small, with soap, with order, with the sound of your own hands reclaiming the world inch by inch. When I finished, I sat on the couch and stared at the old family photo above the fireplace. Douglas was 7 there, missing a front tooth, holding my hand like it was the whole sky. I whispered to that picture, "I remember who you were." "Do you sleep?" Didn't come easy. It came like a thief. I dreamt of papers sprouting roots, wrapping around my ankles, pulling me toward some place with polished floors and lavender walls where everyone smiled with empty eyes. I woke up sweating, the night heavy and close, and in that darkness, I decided if they wanted me gone, they would have to bury me themselves by morning. The sun had that thin, apologetic light that comes after a long storm. I put on my sweater, brushed my hair, and pulled the old fireproof box from the linen closet. Inside were my deeds, my will, the small army of papers that still remembered I existed. My husband's signature was on some of them, ink faded to a ghost. I touched it once, for luck. Then I opened the drawer where my address book lived, yes, a real one, with curled pages and ink stains, and found a name I hadn't said aloud in years. Michelle Dillard, my best friend in high school, now a lawyer. She'd once told me, "Millie, if you ever get in trouble, call me before you call God." I dialed 2 rings, and then her voice, older, warmer, still sharp. "Millie Carter." "Lord, I thought you were calling to sell me something." "Not today," I said. "I need to change my will. Today." "Yes, today." By noon, she was in my living room, hair tied back, glasses perched low on her nose, carrying more calm than I had left. I told her everything. Every ugly detail, every quiet betrayal. She didn't interrupt, didn't soften it. When I was done, she tapped her pen against her pad. "That's theft," she said. "Fraud. You want to press charges?" "No. I want freedom. Lock it all up tight where no one can touch it. Especially him." For 2 hours, we sat at my dining table turning my heartbreak into paperwork. We changed signatures, added clauses, made walls out of words. When she was done, she slid the new documents across to me. "You've just built yourself a fortress," she said, "and he doesn't even know it." I signed, and each signature felt like reclaiming a breath I hadn't realized I'd lost. When she left, I stood in the doorway and watched her car disappear down the street. The air felt lighter somehow. The same house, the same silence, but now it belonged to me again. That night, I slept with the window cracked open. The breeze carried the faint sound of laughter from somewhere down the block, someone's barbecue, maybe. I didn't envy them, I just listened. It reminded me that the world kept spinning, even when families stopped being kind. I told myself, let it spin. Let them talk. Let them plan. I was still here. I had roots, and roots, once deep, do not move easily. Then, the phone rang. It was nearly noon the next day when the phone rang again. The sound cut through the stillness like a bird trapped in a room. For a second, I thought it might be Douglas, ready with an apology rehearsed by Rachel. But it wasn't his number. It was smaller, familiar. Somehow, I picked up. "Grandma." The voice was soft, hesitant. "Ava, my granddaughter. 17, full of the kind of gentleness this world tries to wring out of girls. "Ava, sweetheart," I said. My voice caught on the sweetness of her name. "You all right?" She hesitated. "Are you?" There it was, the question I'd been waiting for someone to ask. I didn't answer right away. "Why do you ask, baby?" "I heard Mom and Dad fighting," she whispered. "Something about you. And a delivery. I don't know everything, but you sounded upset." I almost smiled. Even in that house of schemes and silence, her heart had found its way to me. "I found something they didn't mean for me to see," I said. "And I'm learning the truth about how they see me." The line was quiet. I heard her breathing. Then, so faint I almost missed it, she said, "I think I already knew." That broke something in me, not the way wood splits, but the way ice does. Clean, inevitable. "You can come by if you want," I told her. "Just you." "I will," she said. "Tomorrow." When I hung up, I sat for a long while just listening to the house breathe around me. Every sound felt alive: the tick of the clock, the hum of the fridge, the whisper of the curtains in the breeze. My home had been lonely yesterday, but now it felt like a witness. Like it knew something was coming back to life inside me. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang again. But this time, I didn't flinch. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked steady to the door. Ava stood there, taller than I remembered, her hair a little longer. Her face the same mix of innocence and quiet strength that made me love her since the moment she was born. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "Hi, my heart," I replied. She came in like sunlight, looked around like she was walking through a memory. "It smells the same," she said softly, "like lemon and something sweet." "Home smells like people who clean when they're angry," I said, and she laughed. The first laugh in this house, in weeks. She saw the envelope on the table. Her smile faded. "Is that it?" "That's it," I said. She picked it up, read the name. And when her eyes reached the note, Rachel's handwriting, her hands began to tremble. "She said it was just a misunderstanding," Ava whispered. But I knew it wasn't. I reached for her hand. "You're not responsible for what they do." "I should have told you," she said, tears threatening to fall. "I heard them talking weeks ago, about how you'd be better off somewhere with people your age." I didn't say anything. I didn't know how. "You did now," I said, "and that's enough." We sat together at the kitchen table, the same table her father grew up around. And the air between us filled with the hum of truth finally spoken. She looked so small in that chair, yet so fierce in her guilt. I made her tea, the way my mother made it for me, strong. A little honey. No nonsense. We drank it in silence. Not the heavy silence from before, but a softer kind. One that lets healing take its first breath. When she left that evening, she hugged me tight. Her hair smelled like apples and school hallways. "I'll come again," she said. "I promise." "Good," I said. "Come for you, not for me." After the door closed, I felt something shift. For the first time in days, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hollow. I was alive in the quiet way an old tree is alive, weathered, rooted, unmovable. The house felt different that night. The walls no longer echoed with loneliness, but with memory. I walked through each room, touching doorframes and lamps, whispering, "Mine." My fingertips brushed the wallpaper we picked when Douglas was born, the faint pattern of blue vines still climbing. The air carried a faint sweetness of lemon and thyme. I slept deeply that night, unafraid. The kind of sleep that holds you instead of hiding from you. The morning came soft and golden. I made coffee and stood by the window watching the world begin its day. The mailman waved. I waved back. For a moment, everything felt whole. And then a familiar sound. Tires against gravel. I knew that car before I even saw it. Rachel's SUV. It rolled to a stop right in front of my house. Arrogant as ever. Too close to the curb. She stepped out in cream-colored heels and a blouse that probably cost more than my week's groceries. Sunglasses, big enough to hide a small country. She clutched a paper folder like it could shield her. She didn't ring the bell. She just stood there on my porch, rehearsing a smile. "Mildred," she said finally, voice sweet as poison, "can we talk?" "You've got 3 minutes," I told her, and sipped my coffee. Her smile twitched. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Douglas and I were just trying to make sure you were safe. You forged my medical records," I interrupted, "and used my money. That was never our intention." "No," I said. "Your intention was comfort, wasn't it? For you. For him. Not for me." She blinked, startled by my calm. "We only wanted what's best." "What's best," I said, "is a choice I get to make. Not you. Not Douglas." The wind lifted the edge of her folder, and for a second, I saw the top of a printed brochure morning maple retreat. The same gold trees. The same false promise. "You had it all planned," I said quietly, "even down to the menu." Her face flushed. "You can't talk to me like that, I just did." The silence stretched between us, thick and electric. Then she straightened her shoulders, tried to recover. "Douglas is very upset. He said you've locked him out of your accounts." "I have," I said. "And the will. And the deed. And the trust. Everything that used to be his to tamper with is now mine again." "You can't do that without telling him," she snapped. "I can," I said. And I did. Her jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, setting my cup down. "But you might." For a moment, her eyes flickered on disbelief, something like fear. Then she turned sharply, heels clicking like gunshots against the porch steps. The SUV door slammed, and she drove off, faster than she should have. Like the house itself might chase her down. When she disappeared around the corner, I exhaled, long and slow. The breeze moved through the garden, soft as forgiveness. I felt the first true peace I'd had in years. That afternoon, I called Michelle again. "It's done," I said. "Send a letter to that facility morning maple retreat. Tell them the resident they tried to steal is still living exactly where she belongs." She laughed on the other end, low and proud. "Millie," she said, "you always did know how to make a point." "I just learned to stop making excuses," I said. That night, I watched the sunset from my porch. The sky bled orange and violet, the same colors, my husband used to say, looked like old hymns. I sat there until the crickets began their choir and thought about how easy it is to be erased. When you start believing you deserve to be forgotten, anymore. I was done being invisible. 2 mornings later, I heard a soft knock at the door, not the kind that demands, but the kind that hopes. I opened it and there she was again, Ava holding a bouquet of daffodils. Their stems still wet, petals trembling like they weren't used to being out in the world. "From behind the school," she said. "Don't tell the gardener." "I won't," I smiled, stepping aside. "Come in, sweetheart." She walked in, the way sunlight does through an open curtain. No hesitation. No apology. Just warmth. She sat at the table, right where her father used to sit when he was small, swinging his legs too short for the floor. "Mom's furious," she said quietly. "She told Dad you turned everything over to a lawyer." "She's right," I said. "But that's not what's making her angry. What really burns her is that I did it before she could." Ava bit her lip to hide a smile. "She's been saying you'll regret it." "Maybe I will," I said, "but I'll do it on my own terms, not hers." We sat for a moment in that comfortable hush that exists between people who finally understand each other. Then she began talking about school, about how everyone was obsessed with their phones, how friendship now meant reacting to pictures instead of sharing moments. She said she missed feeling real. I listened. Every word of it. That's the thing about age, you stop trying to fix and start trying to hear. "Your grandfather used to say the world gets louder every year," I told her, "so it's up to us to find the music in it." She looked up, curious. "How'd he do that?" "He planted tomatoes," I said, laughing softly. "Talked to them like they were his old army friends. Swore they listened better than most people." She smiled wide then. That same crooked grin Douglas had when he was her age. "I wish I'd met him," she whispered. "You have," I said. "He's in your stubbornness." She laughed. And in that sound was every good thing this family ever was, before pride, before distance, before betrayal learned how to spell itself. That night, after she left, the house felt different again. The shadows weren't heavy anymore. They were kind. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture like old friends. Every corner of this house carried a version of me, younger, hopeful, tired, angry, forgiving, all of them still here, none of them defeated. The next morning, the sun woke me early. I stepped out onto the porch with my tea. The neighborhood was stretching itself awake. Mr. Franklin was watering his tomatoes again. A woman jogged past with her dog tugging impatiently on the leash. It all felt beautifully ordinary. Then I heard it. The familiar rattle of an old engine that coughed before it spoke. I turned my head and saw it, Douglas's sedan pulling into the driveway. Slower than usual, as if the car itself wasn't sure it should be here. My heart didn't race. It just settled, like it had been waiting for this last storm. He got out, no suit, no swagger, just khakis, a wrinkled polo, and a face that looked like it had spent a few nights losing sleep. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Ma," he said quietly, "can we talk?" "You've been talking plenty, Doug," I said. "Just not to me." He nodded, eyes down. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't mean to get caught." He flinched, then sighed, like a man trying to lift the weight of his own excuses. "Rachel pushed it. She said you were forgetting things. She said it wasn't safe for you to live alone." What did I forget? Douglas. My PIN code. My house key. The son I raised. He winced. "It wasn't like that. I was scared. We've got the kids, the house, the bills. It's a lot. I thought maybe you thought maybe your life would be easier if mine were somewhere quiet and contained." I said. "Don't pretty it up." He rubbed his eyes, voice breaking a little. "I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. Not the man. The boy. The one who used to build pillow forts in the living room and beg me to read. Just one more story. Somewhere between then and now, that boy had learned the art of selfishness from the wrong teacher. "I don't hate you," I said softly, "but I don't trust you either." He nodded. "I deserve that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I brought this. It's from Ava." That caught me off guard. From Ava. He handed it to me and stepped back, like he was afraid of the air between us. I opened it. Inside was a small handwritten note, her letters curling and unsure. Asterisk, "Dear Grandma, I know things have been hard, and I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I heard them planning. I wanted to tell you, but I was scared. I'm not scared anymore. You're the only one who ever makes me feel seen. I love you, and I'm proud of you. Please don't forget that. Ava." Asterisk. I folded the letter slowly and met his eyes. "She's a better person than both of us," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, she is. You can go now, Douglas." He hesitated, opened his mouth like he might say something else, then closed it. He turned, walked back to the car, and drove off without looking back.